the call that changed everything. The phone rang at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and even before I answered, something deep in my chest told me that whatever came next would shatter the careful peace I'd built around my life. When I heard my daughter's voice, broken, terrified, barely a whisper, I knew that everything I thought I understood about the man I'd once loved, once trusted with our child, had been a lie. "Mom," she said, and the word carried more weight than any 17-year-old should have to bear. "My name is Catherine Wells, and I am 52 years old. I work as a financial analyst for a mid-sized accounting firm in Portland, Oregon, where I've lived for the past 8 years ever since the divorce. My life had become predictable in the way that healing lives often do. Morning coffee while reading the news, 45 minutes at the gym before work, evenings spent reading mystery novels or tending to the small herb garden on my apartment balcony. I had learned to find comfort in routine, in the steady rhythm of days that belonged entirely to me. But that night, as I pressed the phone closer to my ear and heard my daughter Emma's ragged breathing, I felt the foundations of that carefully constructed peace begin to crumble. "Emma, sweetheart, what's wrong?" I kept my voice steady, though my heart was already racing. She was supposed to be at her father's house in Seattle for her monthly weekend visit, a custody arrangement that had taken 2 years of legal battles to establish. "Mom, I need you to listen to me very carefully," she said, and there was something in her tone that made me sit up straighter. "I'm in Dad's study, and I found something. Files, pictures, videos." Her voice broke again. "Mom, there are children. So many children." The world tilted. I gripped the phone with both hands, trying to anchor myself to something real, something solid. "Emma, slow down. Tell me exactly what you're seeing." "There are files on his computer, Mom. Folders with names, ages, and there's money, lots of money moving around. Bank accounts I've never seen. And Mom," she paused, and I could hear her crying softly, "there are photos of me, from when I was little. Photos I never knew he took." I closed my eyes and felt something cold and terrible settle in my stomach. Marcus. My ex-husband Marcus, who had fought so hard for those custody visits. Marcus, who had always been too interested in Emma's friends, too eager to volunteer for school events, too quick to offer other parents help with their children. "Emma, listen to me. I need you to get out of that room right now. Don't touch anything else. Don't let him know what you found. Can you get to your room and lock the door?" "I'm already there," she whispered. "Mom, what do I do? I'm scared." I was already moving, grabbing my keys, my purse, my jacket. The drive from Portland to Seattle was 3 hours, but I would do it in 2.5. I had to. "I'm coming to get you right now. Don't say anything to your father. Act normal if you see him. I'm going to call the police, but first I need to make sure you're safe. Mom, there's something else." Her voice was so small. "Some of the names in those files, I recognize them. Kids from my school, kids from the neighborhood where we used to live." I had to pull over. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold the steering wheel steady. I sat in my car on the side of Highway 99, listening to my daughter describe the destruction of everything I thought I knew about the man I'd been married to for 15 years. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just break your heart, it rewrites your history. As I sat there in the dark, every memory I had of Marcus began to shift and realign itself, like pieces of a puzzle I'd been trying to solve my entire adult life, suddenly clicking into place to reveal a picture so horrific I could barely comprehend it. I thought about the way he'd always insisted on bathing Emma when she was small, even when I offered to do it. The way he'd been so interested in her playdates, so eager to have her friends over. The locked room in our old house that he'd said was his office, that I was never supposed to enter. The business trips that never quite made sense, the extra income that he'd explained away as bonuses and investments. I thought about the divorce and how he'd fought so viciously not for custody of Emma, but for unsupervised visitation rights. How he'd painted me as an unfit mother, unstable, controlling. How he'd hired the most expensive lawyers and somehow always seemed to have access to more money than his salary should have allowed. And I thought about Emma, my brilliant, sensitive daughter, who had spent one weekend a month for the past 8 years in that house, with that man. My stomach lurched, and I had to open the car door to breathe fresh air. "Mom, are you still there?" "I'm here, baby. I'm here. Listen to me very carefully. I'm going to hang up now and call the FBI. Then I'm going to call your Uncle David. He's still a police detective in Seattle, and he'll come get you. You're going to be okay. But even as I said it, I wondered if any of us would ever really be okay again. The next few hours passed in a blur of phone calls and flashing lights. David arrived at Marcus's house first, in uniform, with two other officers. They found Emma barricaded in her room, clutching her phone and a backpack she'd hastily packed. Marcus wasn't home. He'd gone out to a bar, Emma said, which was typical for his Saturday nights. I met them at the police station in downtown Seattle, and when Emma ran into my arms, I held her like I used to when she was small and had nightmares. But this nightmare was real, and it was just beginning. The FBI agents who interviewed us were kind but thorough. Agent Sarah Martinez, a woman about my age with gentle eyes and a firm handshake, explained that they'd been investigating a network of child exploitation for the past 2 years. Marcus's name had come up in their investigation, but they'd never had enough evidence to obtain a warrant. Your daughter may have just provided us with the break we needed, she said. But I need you to understand this is going to be a long process. There will be searches, seizures, arrests. There will be a trial, and there will be media attention. I looked at Emma, who was curled up in a chair beside me, looking far younger than her 17 years. Will she have to testify? Possibly. We'll try to minimize her involvement, but she may be called as a witness to what she found. Emma spoke up then, her voice stronger than it had been all night. I'll do whatever I need to do. Other kids need to be protected. That's when I knew that my daughter, despite everything she'd been through, was going to be stronger than I'd ever imagined possible. The search of Marcus's house took place the following week. I wasn't allowed to be there, but Agent Martinez called me afterward to let me know that they'd found everything Emma had described and more. Financial records showing payments to other predators in the network, communications with individuals across the country and internationally, and evidence of crimes that went back more than a decade long before Emma was born. Mrs. Wells, Agent Martinez said gently, I need to ask you some difficult questions about your marriage. We met at a coffee shop near my apartment, and for 2 hours I went through 20 years of my life with Marcus, looking for signs I might have missed, patterns I might have ignored. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the times he'd insisted on taking Emma places alone. The way he'd isolated me from friends and family made me question my own perceptions, convinced me that my concerns were paranoia. You couldn't have known, Agent Martinez said when I started to cry. These individuals are experts at deception. They choose their partners specifically because they're trusting, because they want to believe the best in people. But knowing that didn't make the guilt any easier to bear. Marcus was arrested on a Thursday morning at his office. The local news covered it, and by evening his photo was on every channel. Local businessman arrested in child exploitation ring. The phone started ringing, reporters, old friends, neighbors from our old neighborhood, who suddenly remembered things that had seemed odd at the time. Emma and I watched the coverage together from my living room, and she leaned against my shoulder the way she used to when she was small.
Mom, she said quietly, do you think the other kids will be okay?
I didn't have an answer for that. How do you tell your 17-year-old daughter that some wounds never fully heal, that some betrayals echo through generations? The trial lasted 6 months. Emma did have to testify, but the prosecution worked hard to minimize her exposure to the worst details of the case. She was poised and clear in her testimony, describing exactly what she'd found and how she'd found it. When Marcus's defense attorney tried to suggest that she'd misinterpreted what she'd seen, she looked him straight in the eye and said, I know what I saw, and I know it was wrong. Marcus was convicted on 14 federal charges and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge called his crimes a systematic betrayal of the most fundamental trust society places in adults. 3 other members of the network were also convicted and sentenced. But the real victory wasn't in Marcus's punishment. It was in the children who were rescued, the network that was dismantled, the future victims who were protected. The media attention was intense, but brief. Emma and I both received counseling, and slowly, carefully, we began to rebuild our lives. She graduated from high school with honors and decided to study criminal justice in college. I want to help other kids, she told me. I want to make sure no one else has to go through what we went through. I was proud of her, but I worried too. The weight of what she'd experienced, what she'd seen, what she'd done, it was a heavy burden for anyone to carry, let alone someone so young. For myself, the healing was slower and more complicated. The guilt was overwhelming at first. Guilt for not seeing, not knowing, not protecting my daughter better. Guilt for the years Emma had spent in that house, the times I'd pushed her to be more understanding of her father, to try harder to maintain their relationship. Therapy helped, but what helped more was Emma herself. One evening, about a year after the trial ended, we were cooking dinner together in my kitchen, when she said, "Mom, you know none of this was your fault, right?" I set down the knife I'd been using to chop vegetables and looked at her. "Emma, no, listen to me. You trusted someone you should have been able to trust. You believed someone you should have been able to believe. And when I needed you most, you were there. You saved me, Mom, you and Uncle David and the FBI. You all saved me." She was right, of course. But it took me much longer to forgive myself than it took her to forgive me. 2 years after the trial, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I left my job at the accounting firm and went back to school to become a victim's advocate. The coursework was challenging, and there were days when the material was so difficult to absorb that I had to step away from my textbooks and take long walks to clear my head. But I discovered that I had something to offer, not just professional skills, but understanding. I knew what it felt like to have your entire reality rewritten in the span of a single phone call. I knew what it felt like to question every decision you'd ever made, every instinct you'd ever trusted. I knew what it felt like to watch your child carry a burden that no child should have to carry. And I knew what it felt like to survive it. I work now with families who are going through what Emma and I went through. I sit with mothers whose ex-husbands have been arrested, with children who've discovered terrible secrets, with families whose lives have been torn apart by betrayal and rebuilt through justice. It's difficult work, but it's meaningful in a way that my old job never was. Every family I help is proof that healing is possible, that justice can be served, that children can be protected. Emma is 22 now, a senior in college studying criminal justice and psychology. She's strong and confident with a quiet determination that reminds me daily of her resilience. She still has difficult days, we both do. There are triggers and anniversaries and moments when the past intrudes on the present without warning. But she's also falling in love with a classmate who makes her laugh, and planning a career that will help other children, and talking about maybe getting a dog when she graduates. She's building a life that's entirely her own, not defined by what was done to her or what she survived, but by who she's chosen to become. Last month, Agent Martinez called to tell me that the investigation Emma's discoveries had launched was still yielding results. More arrests, more rescues, more networks dismantled. "Your daughter's courage that night, it's had ripple effects we're still discovering," she said. I think about that often, how one moment of bravery, a 17-year-old girl choosing to look at something she could have ignored, choosing to speak up when she could have stayed silent, changed so many lives. The betrayal Marcus represented was profound and destructive. It shattered my understanding of my own life, my own marriage, my own judgment. It forced me to confront the possibility that evil could live so close to home, could share my bed and my meals and my child, could fool me so completely for so long. But from that betrayal came something else, a deeper understanding of resilience, of justice, of the power that comes from refusing to be silenced by shame. Emma and I learned that we were stronger than we'd ever imagined, that we could survive having our lives turned inside out and still find reasons to hope, to trust, to love. The revenge I'd wanted in those first dark months after Marcus's arrest, the burning desire to see him suffer as we had suffered, gave way to something more complex and ultimately more satisfying. Justice, it turned out, wasn't about causing pain. It was about preventing it. It was about making sure that what happened to our family couldn't happen to other families. Now, on quiet evenings in my apartment, I tend to my herb garden and read my mystery novels and feel a peace that's different from the careful peace I'd constructed after my divorce. This peace is deeper, more honest. It's built not on the absence of pain, but on the knowledge that pain can be survived, that betrayal can be overcome, that even the worst revelations about the people we love can lead to something meaningful. Emma calls me most evenings while she's walking across campus after her late classes. We talk about her coursework, her friends, her plans for the future. Sometimes we talk about the past,
but more often we don't need to. It's there between us, part of our shared history, but it's no longer the defining feature of our relationship. I love you, Mom, she says at the end of these conversations, and I know she means it not because of what we've been through together, but because of who we've become. I love you too, sweetheart, I tell her, and I mean it in the deepest way possible, not just as her mother, but as someone who has watched her transform pain into purpose, trauma into strength. That phone call on a Tuesday night in March will always be a turning point in our lives, the moment when everything we thought we knew fell apart. But it was also the moment when we learned what we were truly made of, when we discovered that even the most devastating betrayals couldn't destroy the love between us or our determination to protect others from experiencing what we had experienced. Justice, I've learned, isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's as quiet as a mother and daughter cooking dinner together, as gentle as a phone call at the end of the day, as profound as choosing to help others find their way through darkness you've already navigated. And sometimes that's the most powerful revenge of all, not just surviving, but thriving, not just healing, but helping others heal, not just finding peace, but creating it for others who need it most.